Hi there, and welcome to Open Class. Hope you're doing really well. Hope you'll have a nice weekend, which is coming up here. It is Friday today, and we are going to look at messages from 3 people today. And actually, everyone is a longtime friend of the channel. People who've been messaging for quite a while. So it's kind of special when you have you know people from the community like that. It's very nice, and everyone who's new messages are super nice too, of course. Now, what was I gonna say? I felt there was some kind of announcement here, but I guess I'll just say that I had a very nice talk with Pat, who has been another supporter of the channel here, and she told me of her success story, how she has gotten to a place where she's not struggling at all, and that is coming out tomorrow. So look out for that one. All right. So with that said, let's jump in and answer some questions. As always, nothing here is medical advice, just general thoughts and questions that I hope helps everyone in the community, really. So let's go here and take a look at the first set of questions, which are from Chen. And Chen wrote 2 messages, which are fairly long. So I kind of highlighted things that I thought were the most important here. So the first one is this. So Chen says, I want to ask about this. Michelle said that when fatigue and tiredness has become a fear, then people start trying not to feel the fatigue or reject it by keeping busy or using another kind of distraction. So what am I supposed to do? How to not make fatigue so important to deal with? Should I do nothing and lay down on bed all day or watch TV? Fatigue is really hard for me, just like Michelle said. And I think we sort of have the answer here in the message. So when what Michelle said is that fatigue, or maybe I shouldn't put words in her mouth, but what I say is that there are 2 types of fatigue. One is a very straightforward fatigue, like we were out running, we feel tired in a good way. It feels kind of nice. We used our body, we were resting, and we immediately just feel like energized again. And that's kind of like the physical fatigue, if you will. And then we have the emotional fatigue, which is more deep-seated. We just like never have energy. We feel exhausted, like we don't want to do anything. The littlest thing makes us feel like it's like out of proportion. Like the littlest thing makes us so tired. We're just too tired. We can't figure out why, etc. That is an emotion, and that emotion acts like other emotions. Like when we don't want to be anxious and we try to push it away, we become more anxious. And similarly, when we have that emotional fatigue, that exhaustion, and we want to make it go away, then it becomes a stronger part of us, because ultimately those emotions are come from thoughts, and the thoughts behind emotions like fatigue or anxiety, they're like warning thoughts. Like the brain is trying to warn us about something by making us feel a certain way. And when we're not wanting to feel that way, it's the same thing as we don't want to listen to the brain. We don't want to listen. And then it tries to push that message even harder. So that's why when we try to get away from emotional fatigue, it gets stickier, right? So that's the whole rationale. Now, so these questions are basically questions, in my interpretation, of like, how can I get away? How can I get away? What am I supposed to do? Should I not do anything? Should I watch TV? Should I be in bed all day? Should I do this? And the way these questions are framed, if you will, they sound like questions of how can I get away? How can I feel less fatigued? Which then shows us that just kind of by the way you're asking those questions, you are trying to not be fatigued, And it is when you sort of go in the opposite direction of saying, what can I do to make it more okay to be fatigued? What can I do to make it more okay to feel this way, to be present with these emotions? That's kind of like the answer that leads towards a really nice place. So I want to answer by saying, like, if it seems to you, if you just have a gut feeling of like, yeah, resting today would make it more okay to be fatigued. If I was resting today, I would not blame myself for the fatigue. I wouldn't be critical, etc. I would experience it without judgment. That's great. If you want to take a walk, if you want to do some, go pick mushrooms, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as you are moving towards a place where you're not blaming yourself. You're not trying to get away from the fatigue, you know. Sometimes distraction is good, you know. You just kind of like, I'm just going to do this and not think about it, sure. Or something like, I'm going to allow myself to feel, that's good. But escaping it is always what makes it more sticky. And let's forward here. This is my dilemma, Chen says. When I do nothing, I can feel the tiredness and sadness overwhelm me. But when I do something to be busy, even a bit of exercise, I get really tired, like nothing I ever experienced before. And sometimes it makes the tiredness worse. And this is, I think, a really good example in a way of when you do nothing so that you're not fatigued, or when you kind of exercise a lot so you don't feel fatigued. Both lead to more fatigue because both have the same intent of trying to escape. But if you rest to allow yourself to feel fatigued, or if you exercise and without any intent of trying to escape, those are really helpful. So everything is really about the intent here. Now, then Chen shares a little bit about having been very athletic in the past. He says, my question is, does not sleeping actually harm us if we are an athlete? Chen has noted that in the past, he used to hit 170 heartbeats per hour, I think, during exercise. But then insomnia happened, whole life changed. And he says, I still force myself to train and play, but this time I saw my heart rate reaching 220. And this leads to a concern, of course. And again, nothing here is medical advice, but my understanding of the literature, etc., has not shown, I've never seen anywhere that short sleep or insomnia causes any health problems. Of course, it causes anxiety. Like when we struggle with sleep, there's a lot of anxiety involved. That, of course, can increase our heart rate. And if you do that plus exercise, then you can see how your heart rate can go even higher, of course. Now, yeah, my ground is spinning. My breath is getting shorter and shorter. Those things are things that sound like anxiety. Now, moving forward here, Chen says, I try to force myself, but after a few minutes, I feel so sick and bad, and I end up only doing small exercises. And, I think we have a question about this later, so I'll just continue reading. And here Chen says, I've achieved so many championships through my hard work and training. These thoughts and memories actually is what made me quit, and made me quite hate sleeplessness. And this is very important because it's like one thing that's very important is like what Chen says here, that these are thoughts and memories. I remember a time where I was physically very active. I achieved these championships. I was in great shape, and now everything has changed. And it's and it is because I have this sleeplessness. The sleeplessness has changed everything. And when thought of that way, it's hard not to be sort of like upset, frustrated, and angry. Why do I have this? This has taken away so much from my life. It's unfair. Why am I punished, etc., etc.? But if you think about it, it's like Chen says, these are only thoughts and memories. It's only interpretations. It's only really ideas. And when you look at it as it's not that I've been randomly, I've randomly been afflicted by sleeplessness, but rather that insomnia happens because we're trying to control sleep. We're trying to escape the sleeplessness, where, it is our response that is actually what's causing the struggle. And the struggle causes more sleeplessness. The struggle causes fatigue. The struggle causes us to have all kinds of experiences. It's not that this thing that's wrong within us that is called insomnia and is causing us to be sleepless. It is how we think and react that causes a struggle. And then as part of the struggle, we kind of like stop doing exercise because we want to preserve energy. We stop going out with friends because we're scared this will happen, etc. It is our response that leads towards like the situation we are in. And when we are willing to see things that way, it can be a little scary, because in one way, it's almost more comforting to think something just happened in my body that I have no control over, and there must be a fix for it. It's kind of a more palatable explanation in a way, because we don't have to really explore our own thoughts and our own emotions and our own responses. But it's not helpful because you really don't get anywhere, because you end up kind of experimenting with things and it doesn't lead you anywhere. But when you're willing to see that, I have actually all the power. I have all the control. Not control over sleep or control over my thoughts or emotions, but I have control over, like, I can be willing to look at things in a way that where I'm actually responsible. I'm responsible because my response is what has led to the struggle. And that's empowering, because when you see that, you see, okay, I can think about things a little differently by learning and educating myself, etc. And then when you see that, oh, it is actually the way I responded, the way I try to escape, that has led to this continued struggle. Just knowing that very gently, in a soft way, leads towards less pondering, less mystery, and more kindness to yourself, and that leads towards, like, okay, I can exercise again. And if I feel really tired, that's okay. I'm not going to blame myself. I'm not going to be hard on myself for that. I'm not going to ponder it. I'm not going to think it's strange. And then you exercise a little bit more maybe, and then you feel good about it. And then, and then this whole thing can go in reverse. So I hope that helped Chen and everyone else that tunes in to see how when we think about the past, memories, etc., in a different way, that can be really, really helpful. Janice, should I force myself back to sport? I think, whenever I hear, should I force myself? The answer always becomes, it is not helpful to force yourself. It is like where you want to be is a place of, like, peaceful sleep, peace of mind. And if we want peace, then the means have to be peaceful. So whenever we force ourselves, we're sort of like in a struggle, in a fight. But when we move away from that, that's when magic happens, really. Okay, so hope that helped, Chen, and stay in touch, of course. Filip says the following. Hi, Daniel. I know it's not the first time I ask you this kind of question. Sorry for that. But I keep on struggling with my problem-solving brain at night. In short, my brain in the second part of the night creates non-existing problems, tries to solve them. This keeps me awake. I know hyperarousal exists in many forms, but is this hyperarousal too? I think I too much try to figure out why my brain does that. I try to figure out the reason at night, what is happening, instead of letting them in. I still see these wakeful dreams as demons instead of just thoughts. Thanks to your videos, I know the theory quite well now, luckily, but I keep on struggling with my active brain at night. Still, I say to myself, it's okay, there's no danger, but it's not useful now. It's just thoughts. But my brain still is not getting this quite well. I cannot connect my brain quite well enough to the thought that being awake is no danger and doing something I like is normal and okay. My brain keeps on fighting. To give an example, I try to keep the night timeless, but at about 5 a.m., cars are starting to pass my house and I hear that. So my brain tries to figure out then what time it is. It's incredible. My brain starts focusing on the sound of the cars. There are more cars. The closer the morning when there are no cars, it's still early. So my brain has found a way to figure out the time. It's a real fighter in my head. Haha. So in short, is there something my brain wants to tell me by creating non-existing problems out of the blue? Maybe it wants to tell me I need to change my life or my way of thinking. I don't know. Thanks so much. Still enjoy your videos a lot, Filip. Filip, thanks so much for all the encouragement and for sending this these questions. And, going back here, I highlighted this because it says, I cannot connect my brain quite well enough to the thought that being awake is no danger. I think that's the really key one here. We talked about it before, Filip, like what you described here is very, very common, very typical, nothing strange or unusual. And the question ultimately is always like, why do I have all these thoughts? And kind of with that question comes kind of like the baked in question, if you will, is like, how do I change this, or how do I stop them? Because it's sort of unpleasant or annoying at least. And what we highlighted there was like, I cannot seem to make the connection that being awake is not a danger. And that tells us a lot, because when you're willfully trying to make a connection, then you already see that you're trying to sort of manipulate your thoughts. You're trying to control them. You're trying to make your brain think this. And that's why it gets so resistant, I think, my favorite analogy here is the one where we think about a non-Homo sapiens sapiens, some species that cannot think about their thoughts. For example, a squirrel. And so when a squirrel, you're driving on your car, right, and you see a squirrel on the street, and you're just like, oh, I don't want to hit you, please get out of the way. And then finally the squirrel darts out. because it was scared, obviously. Like, it realized at some point that this car can kill me. I better do something, jumps out of the way, and then you drive past and you see the squirrel, they're like munching on a nut. It's like, how can it do that? How can it literally it was almost killed. It almost died. It must have been intensely afraid. It must have had intense fear for a moment there, but now it's like sitting there and eating. And this can happen because thoughts are just like, they have practical, thoughts and emotions have practical meaning. Like, they're supposed to make us do something. When we are afraid of something, we're supposed to kind of get away from the fear, right? But my point here is that once you are safe, then if you're not judging or labeling the thought or the emotion, then it is fleeting. It just goes away, and you could literally be like really scared, and then like, okay, now the fear is over, now I'm going to have a cappuccino. But we humans, we can think about our thoughts. We can label our thoughts as, intrusive or negative or racing or persistent or bombarding. We can give them these labels, and we can think about the thoughts and basically say, this is too much. They're too random. They're too crazy. This is too much. And when we do that, then we're sort of resisting the brain. The brain it wants to tell us things, like focus on this, focus on that. It's all from safety, like be safe in this way, be safe in that way, be safe in this way. And when we go like, this is too much, then it says, well, wait a minute, you got to be safe. I need to keep you safe. That's my job. I need to tell you this. I need to really make you see this. And then you're like, no, I don't want to hear that. This is too much. And it's like, no, I'm going to make you hear this, right? So we see here that as being Homo sapiens sapiens, being able to think about our thoughts, we can create a scenario where we just kind of like constantly getting all kinds of thoughts. And the thoughts really, the brain is a survival machine. So all thoughts somehow come from a place of safety. It can seem kind of random, like, why did it make me think about that? Where did that thought come from? But the thing is that there are always thoughts in our brains. It's only when we start trying to like kind of make them go away or identify them or wonder what happened. That's when they become more like we pay more attention to them, the more we're sticky. So I think they are all thoughts are really, at some level, they come from like a safety place. And whenever we try to stop any thought, it will become like a more of a flow of thoughts. So, and this goes again with the connecting. Like, you can't force a thought. You can't make the brain see that this wakefulness is not dangerous. Wakefulness, see that. Come on, brain, get this. You can get this. You can do this. Then it's going to become resistant, right? So it's just something that happens naturally when we're not trying to control thoughts, or control emotions. So I think this was really the most important comment I could think of here. My brain keeps on fighting. I would say, like, is the brain really keep on fighting, or are you fighting to kind of like to make it stop? It's a good question. Like, and I think that can really lead somewhere. And I think we already talked about it. Is the brain trying to tell me something, creating non-existent problems? I think it's always trying to tell you things. It's always trying to keep you like safe, and it's always. But again, it's that in itself is normal. There's always a flow of thoughts happening. Only when we try to push away them, does become kind of annoying. And finally, maybe wants to tell me to change my life or my way of thinking. I don't know what your brain's trying to tell you, but I do know again that when you're not listening, or like when you're trying to push away the thoughts rather, then they become really sticky. All right, so hope that helped, Philip. And we have some live questions from Jake here. Jake says, "Hi Daniel, how are things?" Good, thank you. All good on my end. Very happy to read that. Had a bit of a revelation last week. I was worried all day about sleep and only managed a measly 2 hours after not going to bed, as I felt there would be no point. I had a physics assessment the next day and thought I would fail as a consequence. Turns out I got the best score yet on the assessment, which really helped me put less effort in. Great, getting a good night's sleep. All right, so this is a big one. This is a really big one, and I see this a lot with my clients, that you have this idea that if I can't sleep, I'm going to get fired. I'm going to get a really poor score. I'm going to not be able to run that marathon or something like that, which of course makes you so pressured to sleep. And when you see something like Jake did here, you're the best one, you're the best score after, etc. That can really take the pressure off. And now that said, I can't help but go over this one. Like what was it again? I was worried all day and only managed a measly 2 hours. I was laughing because it's yeah, I think it was meant to be sort of funny with the measly. But yeah, for anyone out there, whenever you find yourself thinking in the terms of like I managed or I was able, then just be aware of that, because it tells us so much about how the brain operates. Like when we think I managed, then it shows us that the brain is thinking, sleep is something I can manage, that is manageable. I just have to figure out how, and just being aware of that, it just shows you that, oh, I'm trying to sleep. I'm thinking of manage. I'm thinking of being able. I'm trying to sleep, and just being aware of that and knowing that the more I try, the less I sleep, that can be really helpful. But yeah, I'm super happy to read this, Jake, and thanks so much for being in touch. And let's go to our last question for today, which is from Nancy. Hi, Nancy. Nancy says, hi, Daniel. This is the last question, I promise. I think you said that last time too, Nancy. But, no need to. Like, you can always send questions. I'm just super happy to have questions. I'm really so grateful for it. Okay, my insomnia has gotten really bad over the past 4 weeks. I have at least 3 nights a week that I don't sleep at all. I've never had that before. I don't know what's going on. I'm tired. I just can't sleep. When I visited my doctor for something unrelated, he told me, no one can survive on that amount of sleep. You were going to end up in the hospital. He wrote a prescription for medication. I did not fill it, and a referral to go to a sleep doctor and a neurologist. He told me I needed a full evaluation. Is he thinking SFI, MS? I don't have any other symptoms other than I just can't sleep and naturally feel exhausted. I'm scared. Looking for your insight. Nancy, as always here, nothing is medical advice. Anybody out there, if you're concerned about your health, definitely talk to your doctor. But some kind of general thoughts that come up here are, firstly, I go into actually great length in This is Natto to talk about why we so often get these thoughts like, it's never been this bad. It's worse than ever. Like, this is totally new. Like, this has never happened before. And the best way I've come to explain this is using that analogy of like the boy who cried wolf. And so there are 2 types, like we can do like we can commit 2 type of errors, if you will. And one is a type 1 error. And that is when we believe there's a threat or problem, but there isn't. And then there's the type 2 error, which is when we sort of like we thought, we ignored, we said like there's no problem, but there actually was, right? So the boy who cried wolf, it goes like this. For those of you who don't know the story, is that this boy is tasked with guarding the sheep of the village, and he's up on a mountaintop or like a hill or something. And he kind of gets bored and he says, wolf, wolf. And the villagers all come rushing to save him and the sheep, but there was no wolf. And they say, well, they'll stop doing that. That's just annoying. But he gets bored again, does the same thing again. And they say again, like, you got to stop doing that. That's annoying, right? So far, the villagers have committed a type 1 error twice. There was a warning, wolf, and they believed it, but there was no threat, okay? And that's insomnia. Insomnia is a type 1 error. The brain's trying to tell you there's a threat, and there really isn't, but you believe it to some degree, and that's what keeps the struggle going, right? So now, continuing the story here, after having done that twice, the boy's like, okay, I'm just going to mind the sheep, but guess what? There is actually a wolf coming this time, a real wolf. He shouts, wolf, but now the villagers are like, this is just trying to pull our leg again. They do nothing, and guess what? It doesn't end well for the boy who gets eaten by the wolf, and probably sheep too, right? So that is the type 2 error. There was a warning, wolf, but the villagers didn't believe it, and that didn't end well, right? This is called a type 2 error, and the brain is a survival machine. It's a safety machine. It's very, very serious. It's very, very serious about your well-being, and it is very afraid of committing a type 2 error. The brain is very afraid of missing something that could be a real threat. And that's why when you have trouble sleeping, the brain is in kind of this fear mode, safety mode, right? And it's always looking for these things that are new, that are unusual. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. That's new. That's unusual. Maybe that's something that I should be worried about. Or I used to have trouble sleeping, but now I have trouble falling asleep, but now I can't stay asleep. That's changed. That's new. Or I have these jerks starting. I've never had those before. Or it's been the longest stretch of time where I haven't slept. That's new. It's always trying to keep you safe. So it always wants you to focus on what's new, what's never happened before, etc., etc. And it can be really helpful to know that this is very common, thinking I've never had this before. This is new. This is something strange. That is totally normal. It's part of the brain's safety machinery. Okay. So that was that one. Now, and when you have more trouble sleeping, there's never any mystery. Sleep is so straightforward. When you're not sleeping, it is either because you don't have sleep drive, you're not sleepy, your body doesn't need to sleep, or you're hyper aroused, you're worried or preoccupied or curious or bewildered or excited or something like that. And particularly when people say, I don't understand what's happening, it's really good to just know that sleep is super straightforward. When you're not sleeping, it's either, again, because you're not sleepy or you're hyper aroused. And in the insomnia realm here, it's I would say 98.97% of the time, it's not that you're not sleepy, it's that you are worried, and sometimes, the reason you're worried is not clear. You're not really sure where the hyperarousal comes from, but it still leads to a place where you're not sleeping. And again, just understanding that there's nothing strange about not sleeping, taking away the mystery truly can help. Now, to get to the question here from Nancy, what is the doctor thinking? I don't know what the doctor is thinking, but I know that there's very little, most doctors get virtually no education on sleep and don't know much about it. And I think it's true that humans and all other mammals, need sleep, and therefore it's homeostatically regulated, meaning if you go a certain amount of time without sleeping, sleep will happen. It just has to. It's kind of like you can hold your breath, but eventually you will breathe. You can't harm yourself by holding your breath, and you can't be harmed by not sleeping. And the difference between the two, by the way, is that the body cannot in itself produce oxygen and keep us breathing without inhaling gas, right? But it can do that for sleep. The body produces sleep all by itself. Nothing external is needed. So therefore, we can theoretically suffocate, right? If we don't have air, which is a real threat. But we can't. That cannot happen when it comes to sleep, because when you haven't slept for a period of time, the body thinks I need to sleep, and then sleep will just happen, right? But this in no way means that if you're kept awake for a long period of time, that can hurt you. Or if you have insomnia for a long time, that can hurt you. Not at all. It just means that this is a self-regulatory process. And if you've been awake for a long time, you will eventually fall asleep. This said, for a doctor who, or anyone who hasn't heard someone say I haven't slept for 2 weeks, it can seem really alarming, really strange. And they think they kind of again, no medical advice here, but they can sort of commit will this be a type 1 error here, and think this is something strange and unusual going on, and I have to really figure something out here. But with insomnia and sleep, it's nothing strange at all there. Okay, Nancy, but I hope this helped, Nancy, and be in touch, and please send questions. I love getting questions. And owner says, this last question I can really relate to. I was in that cycle in the fall and moved past it in the winter. Now I'm back there again, same thing, just cannot switch off again. When my insomnia is bad, it's so tough because I can tell my brain is giving me the bare minimum 2 to 4 hours of sleep. Owner, thanks for sharing this. And I think we can really learn from something here, which is I was in the cycle in the fall and moved past it in the winter. And what really helps when you've been in this spot where you had a lot of trouble sleeping and then I didn't sleep for a while, is pondering why that change happened, because it can so easily, and I see this all the time, it can so easily seem like, I figured it out. I got the solution. I broke the cycle. Is it break or broke? I broke the cycle by doing that, and I got it, But in reality, it's never like that. As long as you think like, I have a solution, or I have to do this, or there's some effort, you will have some trouble sleeping. So when you went from trouble sleeping to sleeping well, that was because you were no longer trying to break the cycle. You were no longer trying to break the cycle. You were no longer trying to force sleep. You were no longer trying to control it. You were okay with being awake at night. You were willing to be awake at night. You were not resisting. Sleeping what always comes from that place. Naturally, though, when there's some stress or something like that, or just a thought, just a memory of the trouble sleeping or anything like that, can again trigger the idea that not sleeping is a threat, and you have to control it. You have to find that solution. You have to break the cycle. And when you think, I have to break the cycle, well, then the cycle is back. It's kind of tricky like that, because when you try to break the cycle, you're in the cycle. When you are abandoned, when you're like, I'm not going to try to break a cycle. Actually, there is no cycle unless I try to break a cycle. Then you sleep well again, or you have no struggle with sleep again, I should say. Owner says, last night it was 10 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. Then I was just up and just could not get back to sleep. And again, we can learn here, like, I could not get back to sleep. The word could implies that you can sleep, and you can sleep, and is true. Everyone can sleep if we look at the verb, to, is that even a verb? If you look at the word, to be able to, or I can, if you look at that as like a bodily function, yeah, everyone can sleep. It's not something you can't lose the ability to sleep. It's like you can't lose the ability to breathe, right? But it's not a skill. And when someone says, I could sleep or I couldn't sleep, it's often in a sense like that person is thinking that some people can sleep, they have an ability, they know how to do it, and I just sometimes can't. I have lost that. I can no longer do it. I couldn't do it, etc. But when we see that it is thinking that there is a way to sleep, there is a way I can sleep, that's what keeps us from sleeping. When we see that, then it becomes easier to sort of like try less again, to back away from effort, and then sleep happens. It just happens all by itself when we're not thinking that we can sleep. When we're not thinking we can sleep or can't sleep, then sleep can happen, all by itself. So, okay, we'll end there. Owner and Jake and Nancy, Chen, and Filip, thanks so much for all the questions and all the support. And look forward to having you back here soon. Hope you have a nice weekend, everyone. And